I never planned on working night shifts, but sometimes life doesn't ask what you want. It was the fall of 2019, and I was just 19, a freshman at the community college in Toledo. I was living at home with my mom and little brother, still figuring out who I was supposed to be. I needed money for books, gas, and maybe a small taste of independence. My mom was a nurse, the kind of woman who lived in scrubs, drank coffee like water, and could go a full day without sitting down. Growing up, I'd watched her work doubles just to keep us afloat. That left me in charge of my brother most nights, making boxed mac and cheese and helping him with homework while the house echoed with our dad's absence. He'd left when I was 12. So when I finally got the Burger King job on Monroe Street, I thought I was doing something good. It was 10 minutes from home, flexible hours, and, at least in theory, simple work. The paycheck meant I could buy my own textbooks instead of borrowing from classmates. It meant maybe one day I could afford my own place and give my mom some breathing room. I remember my first night shift like it happened yesterday, October 14th, 2019, a Monday. The air was cold enough to make my jacket feel thin, and the trees along Monroe were already half bare, leaves sticking to the wet pavement like patches of rust. I showed up 15 minutes early, nervous energy buzzing through me. The fluorescent lights inside hummed as I pushed open the glass door, the familiar greasy smell clinging instantly to my clothes. "Relax, Lena. It's just another shift," I whispered to myself. My manager, Mike, was a middle-aged guy with a receding hairline and a way of making you feel like your worries were inconveniences he didn't have time for. He gave me the usual rundown: clean tables, refill the ketchup dispensers, keep the lobby looking decent until close. "Nights are easy," he said, smirking. "Nobody eats Whoppers at midnight. Well, except drunks." At first, he wasn't wrong. After 9:30, the place emptied. The hum of the fryers felt louder than the conversations. By 10, there were only 2 customers left: a truck driver half asleep at his table, scrolling through his phone, and a man in a dark hoodie sitting in the far corner. I noticed him because he hadn't ordered anything. No bag, no drink, no food, just a notebook on the table in front of him. I tried to brush it off. People do strange things. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was studying. But every time I swept past his booth, I could feel it, his eyes on me. Not casual glances, not the way people check the clock or look around the room. No. His gaze stuck, heavy and deliberate. I hummed to myself to break the silence, but the sound cracked when I made the mistake of looking up. He was smiling. Not a friendly smile, not even a smirk. It was faint, like he knew something I didn't, like he'd been waiting for me to notice. I went behind the counter and whispered to Mike, "Ordered anything? He's just watching." "There's a guy in the corner," Mike didn't even look up from his paperwork. "Don't stress, kid. Some folks hang around, he'll leave." But he didn't leave. He just scribbled something in that notebook, slow strokes of his pen, then lifted his head again. His eyes locked on mine. That was when my chest tightened, a coil of unease winding inside me that wouldn't let go. I kept myself busy with closing tasks, telling myself I was imagining it. But by 10:45, I'd stopped believing that. The hooded man hadn't moved in nearly an hour. The truck driver left, leaving only the faint smell of diesel and the shadow in the corner booth. I wiped the same table 3 times, heart pounding. Finally, I slipped behind the counter again. "Mike, I'm serious. This guy gives me the creeps." Mike sighed, rubbing his temple. "You're new. Just finish your side work, okay?" "Lena, relax, it's your first night." Everyone seems creepy when his dismissal stung, but it was more than that. It made me feel stupid, like my fear was an overreaction. Maybe that was what the guy wanted. He was watching me unravel 1 minute at a time. At 10:58, just before closing, he finally stood. Slowly. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, like he wanted me to notice. His footsteps echoed in the near-empty dining room, too loud in the silence. He walked up to the counter, leaned forward, and whispered, "Tomorrow night, too. I know you're here alone." The words were soft but sharp, like a knife sliding under my skin. I froze, gripping the register until my knuckles whitened. I forced a nervous laugh. "You haven't even ordered." His smile widened, faint but purposeful. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the glass door swinging behind him. I stared after him, heart thundering, until the sound of the fryer timer snapped me back. I told myself I'd imagined it, but I knew better. He had memorized my schedule. When closing time came, I asked Mike to walk me out. He chuckled. "It's just a weirdo. You'll be fine." "Don't be dramatic, Lena." So I stepped into the dark alone. The parking lot smelled like grease and wet leaves. That was when I saw him again, leaning against my car. His hood was down now, pale skin glowing under the streetlight, eyes wide and unblinking. My breath caught. My keys trembled in my hand. I spun and pounded on the glass doors. Mike looked up, annoyed, until he saw what I saw. His face drained of color. The man walked slowly toward the window, lifted his hand and pressed it flat against the glass. Like he was marking it. Like he wanted me to know this wasn't over. The police came 20 minutes later. By then he was gone. The next morning I told myself I wasn't going back. But money has a way of silencing fear. Rent, textbooks, gas, it all whispered louder than my instincts. I convinced myself it had been a one-off encounter. Creepy, sure. Dangerous, maybe not. But when I clocked in that night, the emptiness of the lobby felt heavier. Every creak of the building made me flinch. I kept expecting him to walk through the door, notebook in hand. Mike pretended nothing had happened. Police didn't find anything, just get through your shift. But the truth is, I never really got through any shift after that. I endured them. The fear followed me. I saw figures in reflections, shapes in corners. Once, during a lull, I went to mop the back hallway. When I turned, there was a folded piece of paper on the floor. My name written across it. Inside, nothing but a scribbled smiley face. I never saw him place it. I never saw him come in. But I knew. The weeks dragged. My mom noticed how I jumped at sounds, how I checked the locks twice. She asked what was wrong, and I told her I was just stressed from school. But late at night I saw him, sometimes across the street, leaning against the lamppost, sometimes farther away, just a silhouette. I never caught him moving. He was always just there, notebook in hand. I called the police twice more, but without evidence they couldn't do anything. "Threatened you," they said. "He hasn't committed a crime." He hasn't. But what about memorizing my schedule? What about showing up at my car? What about the paper with my name? Nothing. They wrote it down, nodded, and left. And every shift after that, I worked with the knowledge that he could be waiting, watching. I lasted another month before quitting. The night I finally broke was when I left work and found another paper tucked under my windshield wiper. My name again. Inside, 3 words. "See you soon." I never went back. I told Mike I needed to focus on school. He barely looked up when I quit. But fear followed me home. It clung to me like smoke. Every parking lot felt dangerous. Every stranger's glance felt too long. Even now, years later, I still check behind me when I walk alone. I still wake sometimes thinking I see him at the edge of the streetlight. I don't know if he ever really went away. Maybe he moved on. Maybe he's still out there, notebook in hand, waiting for someone else to notice. The night at Burger King taught me that danger doesn't always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it comes quiet, disguised as ordinary, until you realize how much of yourself it's taken. We don't always get to control who notices us, but we can control when we listen to our instincts. Fear is not weakness, it's a warning, and ignoring it can be the costliest mistake of all. I was 27 years old in 2013, and most of my days blurred together. Graduate school has a way of stealing your sense of time, your health, and sometimes even your identity. I was deep in the middle of my research for a master's thesis in sociology, commuting back and forth between Tulsa and a smaller town where I had been interviewing workers about economic insecurity. It wasn't glamorous and it didn't pay, but I believed it mattered. That particular Friday, March 22nd, I had been on the road for 6 hours. My head ached from coffee, my stomach hollow from skipping meals, and all I wanted was something hot, greasy, and fast before I made it back to my tiny apartment. I wasn't picky, never have been when it comes to food, and when I spotted the neon Burger King sign glowing through the rain on East 21st Street, I took the exit without hesitation. Inside, it was louder than I expected for 9:30 p.m. Families filled the booths, kids with ketchup-stained fingers argued over fries, and a group of teenagers lingered near the soda fountain, laughing too loudly. The smell was unmistakable: fryer oil, onion rings, and burger patties that had been under heat lamps too long. I ordered quickly, slid into a booth near the window, and tried to let the noise wash over me. The rain outside blurred the streetlights into smeared streaks across the glass. My chair squeaked every time I shifted. I remember the simple comfort of unwrapping a burger and finally biting into something warm after hours of highway snacks. If you'd told me then that this ordinary stop would burn itself into my memory forever, I wouldn't have believed you. Burger King wasn't special to me. It was just a pit stop, a place to fuel up before getting back to work. But that night became the kind of memory that sits at the edge of your mind, ready to surface every time you hear the slam of a door or the beep of a fryer timer. At 9:47, those doors slammed open, hard enough that the glass rattled. 2 men stormed inside, black hoodies, one with a ski mask, the other with a bandana pulled over his face, and both with guns in their hands. Conversations died, children froze. The loud teenagers near the soda fountain went silent mid-laugh. Somewhere in the corner, a woman gasped. The air shifted instantly from ordinary chaos to terror. "Everybody down, don't move," one of them shouted, voice cracking with adrenaline. Parents shielded their kids. Workers behind the counter dropped to their knees. My tray clattered as I pushed back from the booth, stomach seizing with fear. I'd studied fear in books, quoted statistics in papers, but none of that prepared me for the sight of a pistol raised in my direction. One man went for the register, barking at the cashier to empty the till. The other stalked the dining room, his gun swinging between tables like a spotlight. And then he stopped at me. Phone. Wallet. Now. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped them. I slid both across the table. He snatched them up, sneered at me, then slammed the tray to the floor. My burger hit the tiles with a sickening splat. For a second, the room went so quiet I could hear my heart pounding. Then across the room, a toddler whimpered. "Shut that kid up," the robber screamed, jerking his gun toward the sound. The boy's mother pressed her palm over his mouth, eyes wide with helpless terror. That was when I understood. This wasn't a robbery I was watching from a safe distance. I was in it, and there was no guarantee we were all walking out alive. The man at the register was yelling now, dragging the young manager by the arm. "Office? The safe! Now!" "Where's the..." The manager's lips trembled. He stuttered directions, his voice nearly swallowed by the fryer's endless beeping. His eyes looked like he was about to pass out. The cashier, a girl who couldn't have been more than 19, glanced down under the counter. I saw her hand twitch. Then I realized what she was doing. She pressed the silent alarm. My heart thudded harder. I locked eyes with her for half a second, both of us praying the robbers wouldn't notice. Time stretched. I couldn't tell if it had been minutes or hours. My knees ached from crouching by the booth. My mouth was dry. My brain, usually quick with analysis, couldn't focus on anything beyond survival. The man who had taken my wallet prowled the dining area. He barked at a teenage boy to empty his pockets, then yanked a purse from an older woman. His movements were erratic, his breathing loud. He was young, maybe younger than me, and it showed in the way his hands shook. That didn't comfort me. A nervous gunman is just as dangerous, maybe more so. And then, faint but clear, came the first flash of red and blue. Police lights reflected against the rain-streaked windows, painting the dining room in pulsing colors. The robbers cursed. The one at the register shoved the manager back. He screamed, Back off or people die. We're not going down. He pointed his gun toward the booths, toward us. I pulled tighter into myself, trying to make my 6-foot frame smaller. Families huddled together, whispering frantic prayers. Children sobbed into their parents' arms. The minutes crawled. Outside, I could hear muffled shouts, the police negotiating through bullhorns. Inside, the fryer kept beeping. The smell of burnt fries hung in the air, absurd in its ordinariness. "Get the safe money," one robber shouted again, desperation sharpening his voice. "No time," the other snapped, pacing like a caged animal. His eyes darted everywhere. I thought he might start shooting just from panic. And then the shouting grew louder from outside. Orders. Demands. The robbers froze, exchanging frantic glances. The younger one muttered, "We're trapped." I knew then that whatever happened next would decide whether I made it home that night. The negotiation began, though it wasn't really negotiation. It was screaming through the glass doors, demands for a car, threats to shoot hostages. The police tried to calm them, their voices steady, professional. I stayed crouched, muscles cramping, watching the gunman's every move. My throat was so tight I could barely breathe. The robbers ordered everyone away from the windows. A father tried to shield his daughter as they were herded farther back. The youngest kids cried openly now, and every sound made the men twitch. I kept thinking of my own family. My mom back in Oklahoma City, probably watching TV, unaware that her son was lying on a sticky Burger King floor with a gun pointed near his head. The taller robber kept pacing. At one point, he aimed his gun at me again, like he remembered I was the guy who had looked him straight in the eye earlier. "Don't even think about being a hero," he hissed. I didn't say a word. The cops tried another tactic, promising leniency, promising no one would get hurt if they surrendered. The robbers laughed bitterly, one of them shouting back, "You think we're stupid? We know how this ends." Every second stretched. I thought of all the papers I hadn't finished, all the small things I'd taken for granted. Cheap meals, late-night drives, even boring lectures. Strange what your brain clings to when you don't know if you'll live. After nearly 20 minutes, the men made their decision. They weren't surrendering. They shoved the manager toward the door, guns raised, demanding the police back away. The manager stumbled, crying, but the cops held their line. Negotiators shouted. Commands echoed. For a moment, I thought bullets would fly. Instead, the robbers shoved him aside, fired one warning shot into the ceiling, and bolted out the doors into the rain. The sound of that gunshot cracked my bones. My ears rang. Chaos erupted. Police swarmed inside seconds later, rifles raised, ordering us to stay down until the building was secure. Some people screamed, others sobbed in relief. I just sat frozen, staring at the hole in the ceiling where the bullet had lodged. It was over, but the silence that followed was heavier than the shouting had been. Tables overturned, food smeared across the floor, wallets and phones scattered. It looked like a battlefield of half-eaten fries and broken trust. I retrieved my things from the police later, my wallet lighter by the cash, my phone cracked, but those were just objects. What stuck with me was the helplessness. The feeling of sitting there, powerless, waiting for someone else's decision to dictate whether I lived or died. I didn't go back to Burger King for a long time. Not that one. Not any of them. For weeks, every time I entered a restaurant, my chest tightened. I caught myself scanning doors, counting exits, watching strangers' hands. The smell of fryer oil turned my stomach. Even the sound of a door slamming too hard made my pulse spike. I told myself I was fine. I kept working on my thesis, kept grading papers for undergraduates. But every time I sat in a fast food booth, I remembered the toddler crying, the gun swinging between us, the words, phone, wallet, now. Trauma doesn't vanish. It lingers, weaving itself into the ordinary. For me, Burger King was no longer just a chain restaurant. It was the place where comfort food turned into the memory of pure helplessness. That night taught me that ordinary spaces can turn into battlegrounds without warning. It showed me how thin the line is between routine and chaos, between safety and terror. The lesson wasn't about bravery. It was about fragility. Life can tilt in a second, and none of us are immune. But it also taught me the value of empathy. Every stranger carries battles you don't see, scars from nights that didn't make the news. So when you meet someone's silence or their guardedness, remember, they might be carrying their own Burger King night and they're just trying to keep moving forward. I used to think of Sundays as a kind of salvation. They weren't glamorous, but they were ours. Since the divorce 2 years ago, it had been just me and my 2 kids, Eli, who was 8, and Maya, who had just turned 6. I worked weekdays at a dentist's office in Reno, answering phones, scheduling appointments, and doing my best not to let the stress show. The money barely stretched, but I made it work. Groceries, gas, soccer cleats that always seemed to wear out too fast, art supplies that Maya swore she needed because the cheap ones didn't feel right. I carried guilt the way some people carry keys in their pocket, always there, always heavy. But Sundays had their place. No matter what else happened, no matter how chaotic the week had been, I tried to carve out something for them. That usually meant Burger King. Silly, maybe. But for Eli and Maya, a Whopper Jr. and a kid's meal felt like a treat. For me, it was a night off from cooking. More than that, it was routine, something steady in a life that had felt unstable since the divorce. That particular Sunday, November 6th, 2016, had been especially exhausting. I had woken early to fold laundry before driving Maya to art class, then doubled back to catch Eli's soccer game. He scored his first goal, and his grin carried me through grocery shopping, through picking up dry cleaning, through the nagging thought that the rent was due in just over a week. By 6 in the evening, the drizzle had started, cold and heavy. The streets shimmered under the streetlights, and I felt drained enough that the thought of cooking was laughable. So at 6:45, I pulled into the Burger King on South Virginia Street. I remember the relief of seeing the parking lot half empty, how I muttered to myself, quick dinner, then bedtime. In the back seat, Eli and Maya bickered about who got to hold the new soccer ball. Their voices blended with the sound of the windshield wipers, and I smiled despite myself. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air was thick with the smell of fries. A few people were scattered in booths. An elderly couple sat shoulder to shoulder over a milkshake. A teenager hunched over his phone near the window. And then there was a man in the far corner. He had no tray, no drink, no phone. Just a small black backpack at his feet and his eyes on us. I noticed him the way you notice a spider in the room. Harmless if it stays where it is, but still too close for comfort. I tried to ignore him. We ordered food, slid into a booth near the window, and I let Eli chatter about his game while Maya played with the straw wrapper from her drink. For a few minutes, I forgot the man was there, until Maya skipped toward the soda fountain to refill her Sprite. That was when I saw him stand. Slowly, deliberately, he followed her, just a few steps behind. She came back pale, her small hands trembling as she set her cup down. She leaned into me and whispered. He said, "Don't trust your mom." The words sliced through me like glass. I turned, but he was already back in his booth, smiling faintly as if nothing had happened. My first instinct was to pack up and leave. I told the kids in a steady but urgent whisper, "On we're going." I shoved wrappers back into the bag, grabbed the tray, and slid out of the booth with one hand clutching Maya's shoulder and the other gripping Eli's wrist. Come. But when we reached the doors, my pulse spiked. The man was there already, standing in front of the glass exit like he had planned it. His backpack hung against his leg, swinging as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He didn't look threatening in the way of raised fists or loud voices. Instead, his calm was the worst part. He stood there like a teacher about to start a lesson. The employees behind the counter froze, unsure. I could feel their eyes on us, but no one moved. The teenager in the dining room slipped quietly into the restroom. It was just me, Eli, and Maya in the center of the floor with this man. "You don't know what you're teaching them," he said, his voice low and even. "Ungrateful. Families fall apart. You'll see." Kids grow up, I pulled my children closer. Please, I whispered, just let us go. He tilted his head, studying us. Learn to hate you for it. You tell them lies. You make promises you don't keep. Eli's hand tightened in mine. Maya buried her face against my side. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but he blocked the only exit I could see. My eyes darted toward the counter. A young worker, maybe 17, caught my look. He gave the slightest nod before picking up a trash bag and pushing through the side door, pretending to take it out. The man stepped closer, his words unraveling into something like a sermon. Parents destroy their own children. They lie to themselves. They lie to God. You'll see. You'll see what I mean. I forced myself to speak louder, stronger. We're leaving, right now. He smiled faintly, not moving. Not yet. I could feel my heart hammering, each second stretching like an hour. My eyes flicked toward the window, desperate for any sign of help. Rain streaked down the glass, headlights sliding by on Virginia Street. But inside, everything felt frozen. Then, after what felt like forever, red and blue lights flashed against the glass. The man's smile faded just a little. Police stormed in, their voices sharp, their presence immediate. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just muttered under his breath as they cuffed him, his eyes locked on mine, as if he wanted me to remember. After they took him away, the restaurant was silent. The staff clustered near the counter, whispering nervously. The older couple had left during the commotion. Maya cried quietly into my coat while Eli asked over and over, "Who was he, Mom? Why us?" I couldn't answer. A police officer pulled me aside, notebook in hand. "Happened tonight?" "Ma'am, can you tell me exactly what I explained everything? The way he'd been sitting alone, how he followed Maya, what he said, how he blocked us?" My voice shook, but I forced myself through every detail. The officer nodded, his pen scratching across the paper. "Did he ever touch you or your children?" "No," I said quickly. "Leave." "But he scared us. He said things to my daughter. He wouldn't let us." "That's enough," the officer replied, his tone firm. "You did the right thing staying calm. The employee who slipped out called us immediately. We've dealt with this man before. He's unstable. No weapons found on him tonight, but we'll be filing charges." I shivered at that word, unstable. It was too clean for the way his eyes had bored into me, for the way he'd spoken like he knew me. We left our food untouched. I buckled the kids into the car, their faces pale in the glow of the dashboard lights. The drive home was quiet, except for the rain against the windshield. That night I sat awake long after they'd fallen asleep. I kept replaying his words. "Don't trust your mom." Why me? Why them? Was it random, or had he followed us? The next morning, Eli asked, "Mom, are we still going to Burger King on Sundays?" I hesitated. My throat tightened. "Not for a while," I said softly. The weeks that followed were heavy with unease. Every time we drove past the Burger King on South Virginia Street, Eli would ask, "Is he still there?" I never answered directly. Instead, I told them not to worry, that we were safe, that the police had taken him away. But inside, I didn't feel safe. At night, I checked the locks twice. I peeked through the blinds if a car slowed outside. I jumped when the phone rang from an unknown number. I knew he was in custody, at least for a while, but the memory of his eyes, steady and calm, gnawed at me. At work, I caught myself zoning out, hearing his voice. Parents destroy their own children. I wondered if he had once been a father himself. Had he lost his family? Was that why he had fixated on mine? I didn't tell the kids any of this. I just hugged them tighter, stayed closer, became sharper with warnings. "Don't talk to strangers, stay where I can see you. Don't go anywhere alone." My fear made me stricter, and they noticed. One night, Maya crawled into my bed. "Mom," she whispered. "Was he right?" I turned to her, heartbreaking. "About what, baby?" About not trusting you. Tears stung my eyes. I pulled her close. No, sweetheart. You can always trust me. Always. She nodded sleepily, but I lay awake long after she drifted off, shaken that his words had reached her that deeply. Months passed before life felt steady again. I stopped driving past that Burger King. We found new traditions. Friday night pizza at home, movie nights with popcorn, walks to the park. Slowly the fear dulled, though it never vanished. Sometimes in the grocery store or at the gas station, I thought I saw him. A flash of a backpack, a tilt of the head. My pulse would race, but it was never him. Just echoes of a night that had branded itself into memory. The kids adjusted faster than I did. Eli talked about soccer and school. Maya filled sketchbooks with drawings. They didn't bring up the man as often, though sometimes I'd catch them glancing toward the door when the wind rattled it. As for me, I realized that safety is more fragile than I'd ever admitted. You can build routines, traditions, and walls around your family, but all it takes is one moment, one stranger, to remind you how easily it can all shatter. I never did take them back to Burger King, not because the food was dangerous, but because the place itself had changed for us. What had once been comfort became a reminder, and maybe that was okay. Maybe some places aren't meant to be revisited once they've shown you their shadows. Evil doesn't always arrive with fists raised or threats shouted. Sometimes it comes quietly, through words meant to unsettle, through the presence of someone who refuses to respect boundaries. What happened that night taught me that vigilance is not paranoia when it comes to protecting those you love. It also taught me that courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about standing your ground in the middle of it, for the sake of the people who trust you most. Safety can be fragile, but love makes it stronger. I've always loved basketball more than anything else. I wasn't the fastest kid on the team or the tallest, but when I had the ball in my hands, everything else in my life went quiet. No bills overdue, no empty chair at the dinner table where my dad should have been, no worry in my mom's eyes. Just me, the court, the sound of sneakers squeaking, the feel of the rim rattling when a shot finally fell the right way. By the time May rolled around in 2019, I was 16, a high school sophomore, still figuring myself out but trying to carry more than I probably should. Since my dad left when I was 10, it had been me, Mom, and my little sister, and I always heard Mom telling friends or neighbors, "Ryan's the man of the house now." She didn't mean it like a burden, but it sat on me anyway. I wanted to be strong, reliable, the one who could handle himself. That Thursday, May 9th, we had a late practice. Coach wanted to run scrimmages longer since we had a tournament coming up. By the time I finally left the gym, it was after 10. My jersey clung to me with sweat, and my backpack felt like it was stuffed with bricks instead of sneakers and books. The sky was dark, the streets almost empty. I knew Mom hated when I stayed out late, but basketball was the one thing that kept me from feeling small. I was starving, though. That kind of hunger where even gas station food would have been fine. I spotted the Burger King on Douglas Avenue still lit up and pulled into the lot. My mom's Honda wasn't there yet. She thought I was on my way home. I figured I could grab food, sit for a few minutes, and then head out. Inside, the place was nearly empty. A couple sat across from each other sharing fries. An employee mopped half-heartedly near the bathrooms, and the buzz of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. It felt more tired than alive, like a place waiting to close. I ordered a meal. Nothing special, just fries and a burger. I slid into a booth, set my phone on the table, and started scrolling while shoveling fries into my mouth. For a while, I didn't notice anything strange, just the relief of food after hours of running drills. It was only when I shifted, glancing toward the restrooms, that I caught him. An older man, maybe late 40s, seated several booths behind me. No food, no drink, no phone, just sitting there. His eyes locked on me, unblinking. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it. People look around in restaurants all the time, right? But then I moved again, and so did his eyes. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just zoning out, staring past me. I shoved more fries into my mouth, checked the time on my phone. 10:21. Mom would already be worrying. Still, I couldn't ignore how he kept watching. Every time I lifted my drink, his head tilted just slightly, like he was studying me. I told myself to stop being paranoid. But the more I noticed, the harder it was to look away. When I stood up to throw my trash away, I heard it. Footsteps behind me, just a half beat too close. I dropped the wrapper into the bin, grabbed my cup, and turned toward the soda fountain. The man's shadow moved with mine. I filled my drink quickly and slid back into my booth. To my shock, he followed me and sat down across from me without asking. My chest tightened. "Late night for a kid, isn't it?" he said, his voice low and calm. His eyes flicked toward my jersey, then to my backpack. "Where do you live?" I stiffened, trying to force a smile. "Just nearby," I muttered. My fingers tapped nervously on the screen of my phone, pulling up my messages. "Parents home?" he asked, leaning closer. "Or are you alone?" Every hair on my arm stood up. My thumbs moved under the table, texting Mom, "Pick me up now, please hurry." He reached across casually, plucking one of my fries like it was nothing. He chewed slowly, smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. "You shouldn't trust strangers so easily. Some people aren't as nice as me." I wanted to say something tough, something that would make him back off, but my throat locked. My backpack pressed against my leg, but it felt useless, like I was stuck in place. His body blocked the aisle. I thought about running, but my legs wouldn't move. My phone buzzed. Mom's reply. "On my way." Relief surged, but I didn't dare show it. He leaned closer again, voice dropping, pretending to be a man. "You think you're grown, don't you? You're just a kid." The minutes stretched like hours. I stared at the table, pretending to scroll, heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. The couple in the corner had left. The employee had vanished into the back. It was just me and him in the dining room. When headlights swept across the window, I nearly jumped. A silver Honda pulled in, and I recognized it instantly. Mom. Her door slammed. She didn't waste a second. She stormed inside, eyes locking on me and the man. "Ryan, let's go." Her voice was sharp, all business. I pushed up fast, but the man leaned closer, whispering something in my ear I'll never repeat. The sound of it froze me like ice water in my veins. Mom grabbed my arm, pulling me away. "Is there a problem here?" she snapped, glaring at him. He just laughed, a low, rasping sound that made my stomach twist. Then he slid out of the booth, turned toward the back exit, and walked calmly into the night. Mom tugged me toward the car, her grip like steel. "What did he say to you?" I shook my head. "Nothing. Just, let's go." But it wasn't nothing. It was something I couldn't shake, something that dug under my skin. For days after, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face leaning in, that smile, those words. I didn't tell Mom. I couldn't. She already carried enough on her shoulders, working double shifts, worrying about bills. She didn't need to know what he whispered, the way it made me feel like he knew me, like he had already decided something about me. At school, I told my friends I just didn't want fast food anymore, that I was focusing on being healthier for basketball. The truth was, I couldn't step into a Burger King without my stomach nodding. The smell of fries, the hum of fluorescent lights, it all brought me back. Coach noticed I seemed distracted. "You okay, Miller?" he asked one afternoon. "Yeah, just tired," I lied, but inside I kept hearing that voice. "You're just a kid pretending to be a man." Maybe he was right. I wanted to be strong, to protect my mom and sister, to hold everything together. But in that booth, I wasn't strong. I was frozen, afraid. Weeks passed before the nightmares eased, but they never went away completely. Sometimes I'd be walking home from practice and swear I saw him across the street, standing still, watching. I'd blink, and he'd be gone. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the fear felt real every time. Mom stopped asking about that night after I shut down a few times. She knew I was hiding something, but she let it go. Maybe she thought I'd talk when I was ready. Maybe she didn't want the answer. I threw myself into basketball harder than ever. Every sprint, every drill, every game was a way to prove to myself I wasn't weak. But deep down, I knew one thing had changed forever. Burger King wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was the place where I learned how quickly normal could shatter, how one night could leave a mark you never scrub away. Even now, years later, I've never gone back. We teach kids not to talk to strangers, but what we don't always admit is how fragile safety can feel, even in the most ordinary places. Sometimes danger doesn't roar, it whispers, testing how much space it can take. That night taught me that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about surviving the fear and walking away. It also reminded me that no matter how much you want to be grown, it's okay to admit when you're scared and to lean on the people who love you. Because being strong doesn't mean standing alone. It means knowing when to let someone pull you out of the booth and back into the light. Growing up in Toledo, Ohio, I never thought much about Burger King. To me, it was just another fast food spot along Douglas Road, the kind of place you hit when you and your buddies were too broke or too impatient for anything else. We were 16, restless, and always looking for somewhere to be, even if it was just sitting in a booth scarfing down fries we couldn't really afford. It was June of 2014, the summer before junior year, when I finally started feeling like I had a little independence. I had just made some extra money mowing lawns around the neighborhood, stuffing crumpled bills into my wallet like it was a treasure chest. For a kid whose parents were always fighting about bills, who was supposed to pay which one, who hadn't pulled their weight, it felt good to have my own. Even if it was just a $20 bill, it was mine. That afternoon was blazing hot, the kind of Midwest heat that sticks to your skin and makes the air feel thick. I remember Tyler, my closest friend, tossing a basketball in his hands as we walked down the street. He was the one who suggested Burger King instead of our usual McDonald's. "Come on, man," he said. "Word is the ice cream machine finally works. I'm getting a cone." "Sweet," I said, patting my wallet. Finally gonna get myself a shake. It was a small thing, but it mattered to me. I couldn't control what happened at home. Mom and Dad screaming behind closed doors, me trying to keep my little sister distracted. But I could control this. I could sit with my friends, eat what I wanted, laugh for a while, and pretend life wasn't so heavy. So there we were. Me, Tyler, Preston, Joshua, and Ethan, sweaty and loud from basketball, pushing each other around and cracking jokes as we headed inside. The place was weirdly quiet for 3:30 in the afternoon. A couple sat close together at one booth whispering. An older man in a gray jacket read a newspaper at another. And then there was us, rowdy kids filling the space with our noise as if we owned it. We ordered, got our food, and slid into a booth. I unwrapped my burger and slurped down that chocolate shake like it was gold. The relief of something cold against the heat felt perfect. I remember thinking that maybe, for once, everything was good. That's when I noticed him. He came from the corner of the dining room, tall and lanky, with long brown hair tied back into a greasy ponytail. His khakis were wrinkled, his sneakers stained, and he wore a faded red Burger King polo. No name tag, just the faint outline of a stitched name above the pocket. Billy. "Hey," he said flatly, standing at our table. "Playground. You kids need to quiet down. This isn't your we froze for a second." Then Preston, the group clown, snorted, pointed at the stitched letters. "Oh man, Billy Burger King. Your name's what, Billy?" The table erupted in laughter. Everyone but me. My stomach sank the second I saw Billy's eyes. There was no humor there, just something sharp, something watching too closely. His jaw tightened. "Have you all thrown out? You think that's funny?" His voice dropped lower, steadier. "Keep it up and I'll..." We went quiet, at least on the outside. But I couldn't stop thinking. Who was this guy? And why did he look at us like that? We tried to laugh it off, but something about him clung to me. He lingered just long enough to make sure we noticed his anger, then turned and walked toward the counter. I expected someone from behind the register to react, to nod at him like he belonged. But no one did. The girl at the register kept punching buttons on the screen. The guy at the fryer kept moving baskets in and out of the oil. It was like they didn't even see him. "Dude," Joshua whispered. "He's not even wearing a headset. He doesn't work here." Preston grinned, still trying to keep the joke alive. "Yeah, he's like the Burger King ghost employee. Boo." He wiggled his fingers in the air, making Ethan crack up. But I wasn't laughing. I kept staring at Billy. He didn't order anything. He didn't even stand in line. He just hovered near the counter, shifting his weight from foot to foot, staring at the menu like he'd memorized it years ago. His eyes would dart back toward us every few seconds, sharp and darting like he was sizing us up. I leaned closer to Tyler. "Man, we should go." Tyler shrugged. "He's just some weirdo. Chill." We finished our food faster than usual, our laughter dimmer, our eyes shifting toward Billy every time he moved. When we got up to leave, he was sitting at a booth by himself, hands folded on the table, staring straight ahead. He didn't eat. He didn't drink. He didn't even blink. As we walked past, I felt his eyes follow us out the door. That night, at dinner, I brought it up to my mom. "Some guy at Burger King was acting weird," I said, trying to sound casual. "There." But he didn't. Said he worked. Her fork clattered against her plate. She froze. "What did he look like?" I told her. Ponytail, polo shirt, no name tag. Her face went pale. "Connor, you stay away from that Burger King. Do you understand me?" "Why?" I asked, confused. She hesitated, lowering her voice. "That man you saw, his name is Billy Hargrove. He used to work there. Years ago. He got fired after attacking a customer with a tray. They said he had issues. The court put him in a psychiatric facility. But when he got out, he started coming back, acting like he still worked there. The police have removed him dozens of times." I felt my chest tighten. "So he just hangs around?" "Yes," she whispered. "Like he belongs there. Like he never left." After that, I couldn't get him out of my head. Every time we drove past that Burger King, I found myself looking for him. And most of the time, I saw him. Sometimes he was outside near the dumpsters, pacing back and forth. Sometimes he was sweeping the parking lot with an invisible broom, moving in neat rows like a real employee. Sometimes he was inside, sitting in the same booth, staring at the counter like he was waiting for someone to call his name. He never ate, never drank, never bought anything. Preston kept making jokes about him, calling him Billy Burger King every time we passed, but even he stopped laughing after a while, because Billy was always there, always watching. One night we were parked across the street waiting for Ethan's brother to pick us up. The restaurant was glowing under the streetlights, nearly empty, and there he was, standing at the window staring out, right at us. "Dude," Tyler muttered. "He sees us." Billy lifted his hand slowly, almost like a wave, but it wasn't friendly. It was steady, intentional, like he wanted us to know he recognized us. None of us spoke until Ethan's brother finally pulled up. When I climbed into the back seat, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might throw up. I didn't tell my mom about that. I already knew what she'd say. The weeks turned into months and Billy became part of the landscape. People whispered about him, parents telling their kids not to go to that Burger King, teens daring each other to go inside late at night. He was a story that everybody in Toledo seemed to know, but nobody wanted to talk about too loudly. Once I overheard two adults at the grocery store. "Why don't the cops just keep him out?" one said. "They've tried," the other replied, "but he always comes back. Always." The way they said it sent a chill down my spine. For me, Burger King stopped being just a fast food place. It was a reminder that danger didn't always come with flashing lights or warnings. Sometimes it sat quietly in the corner booth waiting. I avoided going back inside, but sometimes my friends dragged me along anyway. And every time he was there. Once he even stood near the counter, pretending to wipe it down with an invisible rag, muttering to himself. Tyler tried to act tough. Man, he's harmless, just crazy. But I could never forget the way his eyes looked at us that first day. Not blank, not lost, focused, like he remembered. Years passed. We grew up, drifted apart, moved on. But I never forgot him. Sometimes late at night when I drove past that stretch of Douglas Road, I'd catch myself looking for him, wondering if he was still there. I heard once, years later, that he was finally arrested for trespassing after some kind of outburst. But even knowing that, I couldn't shake the image. The smirk he gave us that day, the mixture of menace and familiarity. It's strange how some memories stick. How certain people leave a mark on you, even when you only meet them once. For me, Burger King will never just be a place to grab a quick meal. It's the place where I realized the world wasn't as safe or simple as I wanted it to be. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't a ghost or a monster. It's a man who doesn't know when to let go of the life he lost. That summer taught me that not every danger comes screaming. Sometimes it comes quietly, wearing a faded uniform, blending into the background. We laughed at Billy at first, thinking he was just another joke. But I learned that people carry histories we can't see, and some scars never heal the way we expect. The lesson I carry is simple. Respect the unease you feel. Trust it. Because ignoring your instincts, mocking what unsettles you, can be the mistake that follows you for the rest of your life. When I think back on the summer of 2017, the first thing that comes to mind is the heat. El Paso has always been dry and hot, but that year it felt like the city had been dropped into an oven and left there. Even at night, the air pressed down, heavy and still. I was 19, working my first full-time job, delivering pizzas in a beat-up Corolla that smelled like melted cheese no matter how much I cleaned it. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to help Dad with bills. Dad had lost his job at a construction company earlier that spring. He was a proud man, too proud to admit how much it hurt him to stay home all day, filling out applications and waiting for callbacks that rarely came. I knew the strain was getting to him. The fridge was lighter, the bills piled higher, and even though he told me not to worry, I could see it in his face. He hated needing me. College was still in my head, somewhere in the distance. I wanted to study automotive design, sketch cars that didn't exist yet, build machines that were more than just transportation. But those dreams had to wait. Rent and groceries came first. Every evening, I clocked in at the pizza shop, threw on my visor and hit the streets until past midnight, weaving through neighborhoods and apartment complexes, trying to stretch smiles for tips that barely covered gas. By the time my shift ended, I was usually wired, sweaty, and too tired to head straight home. That's when Burger King became my place. The one on Dyer Street had this odd comfort. It wasn't fancy, just fluorescent lights and worn booths, but it was open late, and it was quiet enough that I could sit with a Coke, cool off and let my nerves settle before I faced another night at home. Sometimes I'd sketch on napkins, cars with wings, angular grills, ideas nobody would ever see. That night, August 9th, started the same as every other. I parked, grabbed my drink, and slid into my usual booth at the edge of the room. Only the front half of the restaurant was lit, since they closed the back section at night. Two workers shuffled around lazily, sweeping by the fryers, clearly counting down until closing. Through the window beside me, I noticed movement in the alley. 3 figures lingered near what looked like an old storm shelter door. El Paso has plenty of abandoned service bunkers near industrial spots, relics from who knows when. Normally I wouldn't have cared, but something about the way they clustered there, whispering, shifting their weight nervously, it felt wrong. I told myself to ignore it. Plugged in my earbuds, leaned back, and let the cold Coke burn my throat. But then, bang! A sharp crash ripped through the alley. My head snapped toward the window. The figures jolted, shadows spilling against the brick. Muffled shouts carried through the glass, harsh and quick. I glanced at the employees. Nothing. Neither of them even looked up. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it. But my gut told me different. And before I could talk myself out of it, I was pushing open the side door, stepping into the sticky night air, and walking toward the alley. The alley smelled like rot and burnt oil. A street lamp buzzed overhead, flickering, barely throwing enough light to reach the end where the shelter door stood. It was heavy metal, paint peeling, hanging slightly ajar. The 3 men I'd seen earlier were gone. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, go back inside, mind my own business. But curiosity has always been my weakness. I edged closer, spotting faint light flickering inside. A glow, uneven, like a candle or a dying bulb. Just a look, I muttered. Then I leave. I pushed the door wider. The air that met me was stale, thick with smoke, sweat, and something sour that made my stomach turn. The bunker was wider than I expected, a concrete room scarred with graffiti, the floor littered with empty beer bottles and fast food wrappers. At first it looked abandoned. Then I noticed the duffel bag shoved against the wall. Not old, not dusty, recently used. And then came the voice. "Lost kid?" I spun. A man stepped out of the shadows, tall and gaunt, his skin stretched thin over sharp bones. Tattoos crawled up his neck, disappearing under a torn tank top. His eyes were glassy, his movements twitchy, the way someone looks after a long run with drugs. Behind him, another man sat slouched on a crate, a broken pool cue in his hands, tapping it against the floor with steady rhythm. Thunk, thunk, thunk. My chest tightened. I tried to back toward the door. I was just leaving. The tattooed man tilted his head, smirking. "Too late. You saw us." The pool cue stopped tapping. That was the moment panic hit me. My palms went slick, my heart hammering so hard it echoed in my ears. 1 second I was standing frozen, the next a blur of motion as the guy with the cue lunged, swinging it like a bat. Instinct took over. I ducked low, the wood whooshing past my head. Without thinking, I surged up and slammed my forehead into his nose. A crunch, a spray of warmth. He howled, stumbling back. I kicked him hard in the groin, sending him to the ground. The tattooed man shouted, reaching for me, but I was already moving, bolting past him, out the door into the alley. My pizza visor slipped from my head, streaked with blood, but I didn't stop to grab it. I sprinted toward the Burger King lights, lungs burning, legs pumping like I'd never run before. By the time I burst into the restaurant, I was shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I slammed into a booth, gasping, my hands slick with sweat and blood that wasn't mine. 911. That was all I could think. My thumb jammed the numbers. 911, what's your emergency? There are guys in the bunker behind Burger King on Dyer. They tried to attack me. One's bleeding. Just send someone, please. The operator's calm voice tried to steady me, asking questions I barely registered. Names, descriptions, weapons. My answers were broken gasps between gulps of air. When I hung up, the Burger King manager wandered over, arms crossed, skeptical. "You're saying you got attacked mug in the alley? By who? We don't get involved in that stuff, kid." I stared at him, furious. "I'm telling you, there are men back there. Dangerous." He sighed, muttering something about kids and trouble, then walked away. The workers went on sweeping, wiping, ignoring me like nothing had happened. Minutes crawled by. 10, 20, an hour. No sirens, no cops. I sat there trembling, my Coke sweating on the table, wondering if those men were going to come storming in any second. It took nearly 2 hours before 2 officers finally showed up, tired-eyed and slow-moving. They asked me to show them the bunker. By the time we got there, the men were gone, but the scene wasn't empty. Blood stained the concrete floor. The broken cue lay snapped in half. Trash was scattered, fresh enough to smell. One officer crouched, inspecting. "They move quick when they know we're coming," he muttered. "Been dealing with squatters like this for months. Drugs, fights, robberies. They vanish before we can pin them down." I stood there, still shaking, realizing how close I'd come to being just another story in the police log. In the weeks that followed, life tried to go back to normal. I worked, delivered pizzas, saved what I could. But something had changed. I couldn't drive past that Burger King without my stomach nodding. Couldn't look at the alley without picturing those glassy eyes. That smirk, that line. "You saw us." A friend from the shop told me he'd heard more. The man I fought, the one with the broken nose, had tried to rob a post office not long after. He'd been arrested, identified as a violent crack addict with a long history, assaults, burglaries, worse. But what really got me wasn't the man himself. It was what the officers found later. One night, sitting in the break room, I overheard two of them talking when they came in for pizza. They mentioned the bunker, how they'd searched it again after I'd been there. Buried in their report was a detail I hadn't known. Inside, they found a speaker system rigged up with a phone. Not just a radio, something wired to blast loud, monstrous roars, like an animal, like something designed to terrify. When I heard that, my stomach dropped. Because during my attack, I hadn't heard any roar. Nobody turned it on, which meant whoever had set it up hadn't been there that night. Or worse, maybe they had, watching, waiting, choosing not to use it. The thought kept me awake for weeks. I'm older now, but I can't shake that night. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear the thunk of the pool cue on concrete, feel the hot air of the alley, taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth after that headbutt. But what haunts me most isn't the fight. It's the silence. The 2 hours I sat in Burger King, waiting, knowing those men were out there, maybe watching, maybe plotting their next move while the rest of the world kept on eating fries and mopping floors. El Paso is full of alleys people don't look at, corners of the city where the heat hides more than just stray dogs and dust. I learned that firsthand, and I know that out there, behind some door, some shadow, people like that are still waiting. Every time I drive past that Burger King on Dyer, I glance toward the alley, and every time I remember his words sharp as broken glass. "You saw us." And I wonder if that was a threat or a promise. I never thought much about storms before my father died. He used to love them. When I was little, he'd take me out on the porch whenever thunder cracked over Charleston, and we'd sit together just watching the lightning scatter across the sky. He'd say storms cleared the air, made the world fresh again. After he passed away suddenly in 2017, storms started to feel different. Instead of cleansing, they felt heavy, like they pressed down on me until I couldn't breathe. On June 4th, 2019, another one rolled in. By the time I finished my client meetings downtown and started heading toward King Street, the clouds were boiling above, and thunder grumbled like a warning. Normally, I would have gone straight home to my mother and my younger brother, Matthew. But that evening, I had time to kill before picking him up from his night class. So I ducked into the little diner I always went to when I needed to rest my brain. I'd been working myself too thin, design jobs piling up, bills always on the table, and Matthew's tuition constantly reminding me I was the only one keeping us afloat. Painting, my real passion, was pushed further back with each passing month. But I always carried my sketchbook, a worn leather-bound book with smudged pencil marks on the edges. It was my lifeline. That diner had seen me hunched over it more times than I could count. 2 weeks earlier, something happened there that I'd tried to bury. A man followed me out, asking strange questions about my drawings. I never told my mom or Matthew. I didn't want to worry them. I convinced myself it was nothing, just a man being odd. But as I slid into my booth that night, ordered coffee, and pulled out the sketchbook, the memory gnawed at me. The diner was quiet. Just an elderly couple in the corner and a man in a green raincoat sitting 2 booths behind. I didn't notice him at first. Not until I flipped to a sketch of my father drawn from memory and felt that prickle on the back of my neck. I looked up, and he was staring. Not politely, not in passing. Watching. His hood was pulled low, droplets dripping from it. His coffee sat untouched. His eyes didn't shift when I caught him. Something in me tightened. I glanced back at my sketchbook, pretending it didn't matter. But every time I turned a page, I could feel him staring harder, like he was memorizing each drawing. A text buzzed on my phone. Matthew saying class had ended early. Relief rushed through me. I gathered my things, dropped cash on the table, and stood up. That's when he stood too. Same moment, same pace. I walked quickly into the rain, clutching my sketchbook like it might shield me. My umbrella bent under the wind. My car was a block away. The footsteps behind me splashed in rhythm with mine, steady, unhurried. I finally dared to look back, and he was there, across the street, hood shadowing his face, watching. By the time I fumbled into my car and locked the doors, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the keys. But then a second set of headlights lit up behind me, a gray sedan pulling in close, boxing me in. The man in the raincoat didn't move closer. He just stood in the rain, staring, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. I told myself not to panic. I'd always been the calm one, the rational one. But it's different when you're sitting alone in your car at night with a stranger outside your window and another car blocking your way out. My phone buzzed again, Matthew asking where I was. I wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't. I just typed quickly, on my way. Stay inside the building. The sedan behind me idled, headlights glaring in my mirror. My instincts screamed to drive, but there was no room. The man in the raincoat leaned slightly, peering at me through the glass, water running down his hood. I couldn't see his full face, but I didn't need to. I remembered him from 2 weeks ago, the way he lingered too close, the way his voice carried when he asked about my drawings. I rolled down my window just an inch, enough to shout. "What do you want?" My voice cracked. He didn't answer. He just tilted his head like he was studying me. Then, as if on cue, the gray sedan's engine revved. A hand tapped against my driver's side window. His hand, fingers splayed, pressing against the glass. My heart pounded so loud I could barely think. I started the car, jerking the wheel toward the curb. If they boxed me in, I'd make my own way out. Tires screeched as I mounted the curb, scraping the undercarriage, then shot forward, rain spraying across the windshield. I didn't look back until I reached the intersection. The sedan stayed behind for a block, then another. My breath came in ragged gasps. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Finally, after I ran a red light, the sedan turned off. My chest collapsed in relief. But when I checked the rear view again, I saw him, the man in the raincoat, not running, just walking, in the middle of the street, watching as I disappeared. When I pulled up to the community college, Matthew was standing outside under the overhang. He waved, smiling like nothing was wrong. I forced myself to smile back, swallowing the terror, and unlocked the doors. "Sorry I'm late," I said. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just the storm." The truth sat like a stone in my throat. I didn't want him to worry. I told myself it was over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The following nights I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me sit up in bed, clutching my sketchbook to my chest like a child with a stuffed toy. My mother noticed. "You're working too hard again," she said, pouring coffee in the kitchen. "You need rest." She didn't know I kept checking the locks 3 times before bed. She didn't know I dreamed of a hooded figure standing in the rain. A week later, I drove past that diner again, trying to convince myself it was just coincidence, just paranoia. But when I glanced toward the parking lot, I froze. There was the gray sedan, parked in the corner, empty. I didn't stop. I drove straight on, heart racing, eyes fixed on the road. That night I told myself to finally tell someone. But when I sat with Matthew, he was laughing about a group project, carefree. My mom was tired from her shift at the clinic. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I pulled out my sketchbook. Page after page, I redrew his face. The shadows of his hood, the curve of his mouth. Each time the lines grew sharper, and each time I felt his stare returning. On June 20th, Matthew called me in a panic. "Ellie, can you come get me early? There's some guy hanging around outside the college. He's just standing there." I didn't ask for a description. I already knew. I drove like a madwoman, praying the whole way. When I pulled up, Matthew jumped into the car, his face pale. Across the street, half hidden in shadow, stood the man in the raincoat. "That's him," he said, pointing. "Did he say anything to you?" I asked. "No, just watched." I slammed the car into gear and sped off. Matthew was silent, gripping the seatbelt, and I realized I couldn't keep pretending. I told him everything: the diner, the sedan, the night he boxed me in. Matthew's jaw tightened. "We have to call the police." We did, but by the time officers checked the diner and the college, there was nothing. No sedan, no man in the raincoat. They told us he was probably a drifter, someone unstable but not necessarily dangerous. But I knew better. He wasn't drifting. He was waiting. The storm season dragged on. Every time I passed a window, I half expected to see him standing there. I stopped going to the diner altogether. I started parking closer to buildings, never walking alone. Then, one night in July, as I locked up the house, I heard it. A car idling outside. I peeked through the curtains, and there it was, the gray sedan, sitting at the curb, lights off, engine humming. I woke Matthew, and we called the police again. But by the time they arrived, the car was gone. The officers exchanged looks, telling us to keep our doors locked, to stay aware. That was it. I never saw the man in the raincoat up close again. Maybe he moved on. Maybe he got arrested. Maybe he was still out there watching someone else. But sometimes, when a storm rolls in and the rain beats against my windows, I feel that same weight pressing down. And I remember the way he stared, like he already knew me. Like my sketchbook wasn't just paper. It was a map straight into my life. I still carry it everywhere. But I don't sketch in diners anymore. And I never ever sit with my back to the door. Danger doesn't always come crashing in with noise and violence. Sometimes it waits quietly, testing your boundaries, daring you to ignore your instincts. I stayed silent too long, afraid of worrying the people I loved. But silence almost trapped me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. When something feels wrong, speak up. Tell someone. Don't wait until the storm is already at your window. I used to love late-night walks. Sacramento summers have this heaviness to them, the air sticky and thick. But when the sun finally sinks behind the skyline and the streets quiet just a little, there's a comfort in the hum of cars and the neon glow of bars and fast food joints. Back then I was 25, living paycheck to paycheck, working long hours at a downtown office by day, and blowing off steam with my best friend Jessica on weekends. She was the kind of friend who always had a story, always laughed too loud, always made me feel braver than I really was. On Saturday, August 18th, 2018, we left a neighborhood pub around midnight. We weren't drunk, just buzzed enough to know driving wasn't smart. I'd lost a cousin to a drunk driver years earlier, and the idea of getting behind the wheel after drinks made me sick. So we walked. Jessica teased me for being paranoid, but she linked her arm through mine, steadying herself on the uneven sidewalk. We headed toward the Burger King on J Street, one of the only places still open. I'd been there dozens of times before. Cheap food, greasy comfort, familiar. I never thought twice about it. But that night would be the last time I ever set foot in that place. It was 12:25 when we pushed through the glass doors. The lights inside buzzed against the quiet outside, and the air smelled of fries and old mop water. A couple of college kids in hoodies sat hunched over their phones. Near the entrance, a man slouched in a booth. His hair was unkempt, his eyes half-lidded, a worn backpack sitting at his feet. I didn't give him much thought at first. I was too busy ordering food, 2 cheeseburgers, fries, sodas. I even joked that Burger King fries were better drunk food than pizza. Jessica laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. For a moment, everything felt easy. But when we carried our tray to a booth, I noticed the man watching. Not casual glances, not tired stares. Focused. Sharp. I told myself not to make a big deal of it. People watch other people all the time. But his eyes didn't move when mine did. He kept staring like he was waiting for something. My stomach tightened, but I smiled at Jessica, pretending not to notice. We'd barely taken our first bites when he stood and shuffled toward us. At first, I thought he was asking for money. His voice was low, hard to understand over the hum of the fryer. "Don't lie," he said suddenly. "People like you always have money. You just don't care about anyone else." Jessica stiffened, turning her body away, pretending to scroll her phone. I tried to keep my tone gentle. "I'm sorry. I only have enough for our food tonight." He didn't leave. He stood over the booth, eyes drilling into mine. His words grew louder. "You're lying. People like you don't know what it's like. You sit there eating while I got nothing." The room felt smaller, the buzzing lights louder. I reached for the fries, sliding the carton across the table. "Here, you can have some." He snatched one, chewed slowly, then glared. "People like me? That's it? You think that makes up for ignoring?" Jessica leaned toward me, whispering. "Nat, let's just go." I reached into my wallet, pulling out a $10 bill. Shaky smile, hoping to end it. "Here, take this, okay?" I offered it but his face twisted, his voice rising. "I asked for 15. What, I'm not worth 5 more?" Other customers looked up. The college kids shifted nervously. Jessica's hand shook against her phone. "Please," she whispered to him. "We don't want trouble." That's when his tone changed. His voice dropped low, muttering things I can't forget. Crude threats, promises of what he'd do if he caught us outside. His eyes flicked toward the exit like he was already imagining it. My pulse thudded in my ears. I slipped my phone under the table and dialed 911, whispering into the receiver while Jessica tried to keep him distracted. I prayed he wouldn't notice. The dispatcher's voice was calm, asking questions I could barely answer. "Where are you? What does he look like? Is anyone hurt?" My throat was dry. I mumbled, "Burger King, J Street, man with a backpack," while my thumb shook against the phone. Jessica stood suddenly, grabbing my wrist. "Let's go." Her voice was firm, louder than I'd ever heard it. We bolted toward the side door, fries scattering across the table, soda cups tipping. The man shouted after us, footsteps echoing across the tile. "You think you can run from me?" His voice carried through the glass doors, spilling into the night. The air outside was thick, heavy with heat. My sandals slapped against the pavement as we sprinted across the lot. I clutched the phone like it was the only thing tethering me to safety. My chest burned, but I didn't stop until flashing lights cut through the darkness. Red and blue flooded the curb as a patrol car pulled in, 2 officers jumping out. Relief nearly knocked me over. I tried to point, tried to tell them he was right behind us. But when I turned, he was gone. Vanished into the maze of alleys and side streets like he'd never been there. Inside, his backpack sat abandoned in the booth. Officers searched it. Just a few clothes, some papers. Nothing that explained who he was or why he'd chosen us. We gave statements, our voices shaky, our fries and sodas still clutched like lifelines. But when the police left, all I felt was exposed. For weeks, I couldn't eat in public without scanning every face in the room. Every time I saw someone with a backpack, my chest tightened and my hands started to sweat. Jessica stopped walking anywhere after dark. She started driving even short distances, locking the doors before the engine even turned over. People told us we were lucky nothing worse had happened, and maybe they were right. But luck didn't erase the memory of his stare or the way his voice crawled under my skin. One night I sat in my apartment with the TV flickering and my untouched dinner in front of me. I thought about my cousin, about how fragile safety is, how quickly it can be snatched away. That night in Burger King wasn't violent, not in the way police reports define violence, but it left a mark just the same. Jessica and I drifted a little after that. Not because we weren't close, but because we didn't talk about it much. Talking made it real again. It's been years since that night, but I still remember it in fragments. The buzz of fluorescent lights, the smell of greasy fries, the sound of his footsteps echoing behind us. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if the police hadn't pulled up when they did. Would he have followed us into the street? Would someone have gotten hurt? I don't go to that Burger King anymore. I don't even walk downtown alone after dark. Maybe that makes me cautious, maybe even paranoid, but I'd rather carry that than the alternative. I tell myself it was just one night, just one man. But in truth, it changed the way I move through the world. It taught me that fear can live in the most ordinary places, in a fast food booth under buzzing lights, with fries growing cold on the table. And once it finds you, it doesn't really leave. I never thought much about routines until they started to betray me. Most people live by them. Wake up, coffee, commute, work, home, sleep. My own wasn't much different. I worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm in downtown Cleveland, a job that paid the bills but drained the soul. Every evening I took the same route home, my sketchbook tucked in my bag, my earbuds feeding me some comfort music against the gray noise of the city. My one small indulgence was the Burger King off Euclid Avenue. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? People imagine artists in cozy cafes with dim lights and jazz records spinning. Me? I had a fast food joint where the smell of fries lingered in the air. The booths were cracked vinyl and the soda machine hissed like a tired dragon. But it worked for me. It was quiet enough to sketch, bright enough to see my lines, and anonymous enough that I could disappear into the crowd. That's where I first saw him, Daniel Hayes. At first, he blended into the scenery. Just another face, another customer trying to stretch a dollar meal. He was tall, but slouched, with messy dark hair that looked like he cut it himself. I thought nothing of it. People came and went, but after a few weeks I noticed he wasn't coming and going. He was staying. Same corner table, same late night hours, same watchful eyes. The first time our eyes met, he smiled politely, a small acknowledgement between strangers. The second time, he held the door open as I walked in. "Evening," he said, like he knew me. I muttered a thank you and hurried to my booth. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Cities are smaller than we think sometimes, paths crossing again and again. But then I switched days, visiting on a Wednesday instead of Friday, and there he was. Same corner, same untouched coffee, same stare. I told myself not to be dramatic. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he liked the same quiet. Still, my pen felt heavier in my hand when I realized he was sketching me. Or so I thought. He had a napkin and a ballpoint pen, and his eyes flicked between me and the page. When I finally worked up the nerve to glance, he slid it across the aisle. It was me. My exact pose. My head bent over my sketchbook. Every line of my jacket drawn with a shaky but earnest hand. "You look better on paper than in real life," he whispered. My first reaction wasn't fear. It was confusion. I didn't know if it was supposed to be a compliment or an insult. I managed a tight smile, muttered, "Thanks," and buried myself in my work. But I couldn't focus. From that night on, he was always there, and every time I walked through that glass door, the little voice in my head whispered, "He's waiting for you." I tried ignoring him. I thought if I gave him nothing, he'd eventually move on. But Daniel wasn't the kind of person you could shake off so easily. He started small, questions asked too casually to be innocent. "You live around here? You walk home or catch a bus? Got anyone waiting for you?" His tone was always light, like he was just making conversation, but his eyes were too sharp. They held me in place. "Just curious," he'd say when I didn't answer. But I noticed things. People around here don't always notice each. I didn't like the way he said that. One night I left quickly, stuffing my sketchbook in my bag without even zipping it. My soda spilled as I bolted for the door. The rain outside was heavy, Cleveland in its usual unforgiving mood. As I crossed the intersection, I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. It was him. He wasn't running. He wasn't even trying to catch up. He just followed. 2 blocks, silent, steady. My chest tightened with every step until I ducked into a corner convenience store. I pretended to browse the candy aisle, my hands trembling over a bag of licorice. Through the glass, I saw him pass by, his head turning slightly as though he knew I was hiding. I didn't sleep that night. The next day at work, I told myself I'd been paranoid. I replayed it over and over. Maybe he just lived in the same direction. Maybe he hadn't even noticed me. My coworkers laughed about memes and deadlines while I sat there wondering if I was inventing a villain in my head. The following week, he was back. Always back. Sometimes he'd compliment my drawings, remembering details I'd forgotten I'd shown him. Sometimes he'd talk about his own life, how he'd dropped out of college, how he worked night shifts at a warehouse, how he didn't really have friends. There was a sadness to him, a need, and against my better judgment, I sometimes felt bad for him. People don't really see me, he told me one night, but you do. I wanted to say no, I don't. I wanted to tell him I'd rather be invisible to him. Instead, I just nodded and went back to my sketching, my stomach tight with knots. It wasn't fear every time. That's the worst part. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if he actually did care about me in some strange, warped way, and that thought scared me more than anything else. It all came to a head one Friday night when I brought my best friend, Claire. I needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. We slid into my usual booth. I tried to sketch like nothing was wrong, but there he was, across the room, his tray untouched, his eyes locked on me. Claire leaned in, whispering, "Looks like you've got a secret admirer." I laughed too quickly, too nervously. "He's just weird. Don't make it a thing." But Claire wasn't blind. She saw my shaking hands, the way I couldn't sit still. When I excused myself to the bathroom, she confronted him. Later, she told me his answers were strange. Flat, almost rehearsed. "She doesn't need anyone else," he said. "I take care of her." By the time I returned, Claire looked shaken. She didn't tell me what he'd said until later, but I could see the unease in her eyes. That night, as I packed my sketchbook away, I found a folded note slipped between the pages. My blood ran cold as I opened it. "You don't need anyone else. You're safest with me." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled at Claire, pretending nothing was wrong until we were outside. When I showed her the note under a street lamp, she grabbed my arm. "Emily, this isn't harmless anymore. You need to tell someone." I nodded, but my mind spun. Tell who? The police? What would I even say? That a man liked to sit in the same fast food joint and draw me? That he followed me once in the rain? It all sounded so flimsy, like paranoia, but I couldn't deny the truth anymore. Daniel wasn't just another customer. He wasn't a coincidence. He was writing himself into my story, sentence by sentence, whether I wanted him there or not. I tried to change my routine. I stopped going to Burger King. I sketched at home, in cafes across town, even in my office break room. But the unease clung to me like smoke. Then one evening, as I walked home with groceries, I saw him across the street. Not at Burger King, not in our spot. Just there, watching. "Hey," he called softly, stepping off the curb. My pulse spiked. "Daniel, you can't. I just wanted to talk." His tone was calm, almost pleading. "I didn't mean to scare you." "You are scaring me," I said, my voice sharper than I expected, leaving notes. "It's not okay." "This isn't okay," following me. For a second, his face shifted, hurt, then something darker. "I just thought you understood me," he muttered. "Nobody else does." I clutched my grocery bag tighter and stepped back. "Do. I'll go to the police." "Daniel, stop. Don't follow me again. If you..." He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he turned and walked away without another word. I stood frozen until he disappeared into the rain. That night, Claire stayed over. I barely slept. Every creak in the apartment made me flinch. Every car passing outside felt like it was slowing down for me. I never went back to that Burger King again. Weeks passed. Slowly, the fear faded. He didn't show up again, at least not that I could see. I changed my routes, changed my habits. Life began to feel normal again. But normal isn't the same after something like that. Normal means checking the locks twice. Normal means glancing over your shoulder in every crowd. Normal means wondering if the person at the bus stop is watching you too closely. I never heard from Daniel again. Maybe my warning was enough. Maybe he found someone else to watch. Or maybe he's still out there waiting. Sometimes when I'm sketching late at night, I remember his words. You don't need anyone else. You're safest with me. And I realize how dangerous it is when loneliness turns into obsession, when someone decides they have the right to claim another person's story. And I remember how close I came to letting him write mine. Obsession disguised as affection is never love. It is control. It is danger. And it thrives when we ignore the small red flags because they seem harmless at first. Emily's story is a reminder that boundaries protect us, and listening to our instincts can save us. When someone tries to write themselves into your life without permission, the bravest thing you can do is say no, and mean it.